Here's another podcast from the Podbros Network.
What's happening, everyone? We are back. It is Jeff and John with the Jean Pod Van Dam cast.
Woohoo! Hey, guys.
And I don't even know, dude. It's been forever, number one.
Too long.
Way too long. And number two, life is just crazy, okay? I know everyone has excuses. They're like buttholes. They stink, whatever. But we seriously have been busy, and scheduling is what it is. Jeff started a new position. Scheduling has been crazy.
The schedule has changed 6 times in the past 4 months.
Jeez, man. And it feels that's exactly it. That's the last time that we recorded. We actually sat down, and this is what this episode is about. We sat down with Dave and Palmer from Long Walk, Short Drink. We did a crossover episode.
That was a lot of fun.
And it definitely was. Definitely. I've become a fan of their stuff, and I get excited when I see that they have something new come out.
I follow Dave on Instagram.
Yeah, man. And they're always working on something. So go check out those guys. This is finally us, and this is me saying, I'm sorry. This should have went out back in September, and it didn't.
Only 5-ish months.
Yeah, it's end of January now, but hey, you know what?
We're podcasters.
Exactly.
It's not a real job.
Yeah, come on, man. It is only when you support us at TeePublic.
That's right.
t.pub/lic/podbros, or go on our Patreon at patreon.com/podbros. Big news for us. We are no longer in beautiful Wyandotte, Michigan.
No, we're in awful, terrible, traffic-ridden Woodhaven, Michigan.
Woodhaven, more like smelly Woodhaven.
Ouch. That one hurt. We call it Hoodhaven around here.
Hoodhaven, yeah.
Or the Woo.
Ah, the Woo.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have had one police homicide, or a police-related homicide.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, with an attempted vehicular homicide at our local Walmart.
Oh, my gosh,
yeah,
man.
Somebody tried to run over a cop and he shot him.
Wow.
I know, right?
Wow, I didn't even hear this. When did this happen?
Like 2 years ago, maybe? That's pretty common at that Walmart. And also an employee got stabbed in the neck with some keys when they tried to stop a thief from stealing a television.
Oh, my gosh. Dear Lord, man. Yeah, you are in Hoodhaven now.
Yep.
So, gosh, now I'm like freaking out because there's actually some news and stuff. So, yeah, we want to do some Van Dam news and also talk about the fact that, we no longer have the studio, unfortunately. It's because of all you people, you cheapskates that listen for free. No, it will kind of partially, sorry. But it's also Amazon, as you know. We probably, I don't know, on one of the shows, maybe this one, we lost our partnership with Amazon back in the summer because they were like, your friends and family are the only one using this link. And we were like, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, no, it's all our listeners, which is
our
truthful.
Family and friends.
Which are our family and friends, exactly. And the poor people in Europe that listen, that put us into the top 10 in Sweden, they can't use our Amazon link. Yeah, Sweden.
Hell yeah, I love the Swedish.
Yeah, exactly. Love Swedish fish.
Swedish meatballs.
Yep, exactly. The Swedish chef.
IKEA.
Yep. And everything else about Sweden. So thank you. And we I realized that I was like, well, we're paying rent for the studio and we're just not seeing the returns. And so I've made the executive decision to part ways. We absolutely love the DCA, and if we had the money, we'd be back in there. This is just how things go. So, I mean, that's how it is, and we're still continuing to do this, and you know, we do decent with our Patreon and with TeePublic, and we can't thank you guys enough that support us in that way. And that will help us with our cost right now that go into just the behind the scenes stuff, the hosting and whatnot, and the platform, and so yeah, we appreciate that. But we had to cut back. So right now we are recording out of a live studio apartment.
Hell yeah! It's actually the bathroom of the Woodhaven Walmart.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the dude that used the car keys because I was stealing.
To keep everyone out of the bathroom.
Yeah. Get out of here. We got probably about 5 minutes before the police come and get us, but
We'll probably just run them over.
Yep. Seemed to work for that one guy, right? No.
We on the Jean Pod Van Dam cast do not advocate running over the police.
No, and the opinions of the hosts of Jean Pod Van Damcast are their own and in no way reflect the opinions of Podbros Network LLC and their terrible dark humor. But anyway, I was like, you know what? Let's do some Van Dam news, and there is some Van Dam news. And also, it's perfect that it goes with this episode because Dave ended up tweeting to me this link, and I'm like, what the heck? It's a damn good fight. Van Damme, And I'm like, what is this? And I click play. Jean-Claude Van Damme and his son Chris are now getting into the podcast world.
What?
Yes. So now Van Damme has a podcast called Damn Good Fights. And I don't know when the episodes are coming out. They just did this funny little intro. And I was like, well, it's now time for me to fake a story so that I can be a guest on there to show that I put up a good fight.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah.
And we can review each episode of their podcast on our podcast.
Hey, there we go. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. No, that one wasn't that good. And then you guys can be like, oh, they jumped the shark on this one. Please stop. But yeah, thanks to Dave for pointing that out because I had no clue that was happening. And so now we have something new from the Van Damme world. Here's a great piece of news. Hollywood star Jean-Claude Van Damme wishes Happy New Year to Bangladesh.
That's nice.
From the Dhaka Tribune. But I mean, all this is like a week ago, 7 hours ago. Why is the top 6 Blackhawks pop culture salutes? Oh, Van Damme's in it. Let's see. Oh, man. So much Van Damme news. That's within the past couple weeks, actually.
Is he filming in Bangladesh or something?
Maybe. I don't know. Bloody Disgusting actually has this. This is
like
pretty sweet.
Guys.
NECA's Alpha Predator figure includes mask based on unused Jean-Claude Van Damme costume.
Really?
Yes. Take a look at that.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. The only thing that I also wish is that you could put Van Damme's head on the body
with the gigantic glasses that he was wearing at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, that looks cool. I actually might pick that one up. And then on Vlad TV, Michael J. White, Jean-Claude Van Damme is an actor, not a fighter. Hey.
Watch your mouth.
Yeah.
This is coming from Spawn.
Yeah, man. That's kind of funny. Let's see. Comment was like, Bloodsport and Double Impact were my shit as a kid, but why does Van Damme always have to show his ass in movies?
Why not?
Exactly. How dare you?
Who is he to question him?
Exactly.
What was Michael J. White's biggest movie again? Spawn? Yeah.
I guess, yeah. I mean, all right. There might be other people who disagree, but I don't know. I think that's kind of the audience that knows him.
And that's kind of the black sheep of the comic book movie. Like,
yeah, right.
Like a lot. Most people. See, I liked Spawn. I still would enjoy watching it to this day.
I actually did. I rewatched
get a Mortal
it last
Kombat,
year.
Vibe from it.
Exactly. The CGI, in some people's opinion, doesn't hold up, but it makes the movie even better.
It has really good practical effects, though. Like, that gigantic Violator animatronic.
Yes.
Really cool.
Yeah, man. NBC Sports has top 6 Blackhawks pop culture salutes ever. Sudden death is included.
Hell yeah.
Let's see what they say about it. Jean-Claude Van Damme. There's nothing else needed to defend this selection, but the 1995 action flick puts the Blackhawks against the Pittsburgh Penguins in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, of course with the vice president in attendance. And that's, they also mentioned the Chris Pratt Parks and Rec song, which is hilarious. Let's see. Someone's doing splits in a movie. based off Jean-Claude Van Damme. A lot of Blackhawks talk, actually. And I think that's good for now. Let's just say that's good.
Already tapped the well.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other stuff in here. Oh, there's a Polish article I can try to read to you.
Is it about how to screw in a light bulb with 2 of your friends?
Yep, that's exactly it. It's about how to get a one-armed Polish man out of a tree. Once again, the Podbros Network. So anyway, yeah, trying to look at all this stuff. That's it for news for that. We do a little fun. I'm sure there's something else that came up that I just can't remember. I know there is.
Feel free to remind us.
Yeah, exactly. We're still pretty live on Twitter. Not nearly as much as we should be, but I like to tweet around with people. But anyway, yeah, no, we can't thank Dave and Palmer enough for doing that episode with us, and it was truly a blast. I just wish we could have spoke more. I had such a great time with them.
Yeah.
Palmer actually said just recently in the latest episode he wanted to do a Mandy exclusive with us for Rage on Cage.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And I was like, shit, man, we already recorded the Mandy. That was like the first episode.
And yet.
But we can still do it again, man, because for those following, actually, Rage in a Cage and Every Day I'm Hustling is coming out very soon. I'll just say that. So I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah, I can't thank Long Walk Short Drink enough. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy this episode. Wasn't expecting to do a 13-minute take on this intro, but
whittle it down.
It's been a while. Yeah. We just love you and miss you guys. And it's like we're at a grocery store and we just saw each other and now we're talking and now I'm like, oh, dude, we should definitely do dinner, but we'll never do dinner.
Yep.
So just
I gotta go. My ice cream's melting.
Take it for what it is. We love you. Fender.
Joining us today,
Yes.
very special guests. We have the bros joining us. Hey guys, how's it going?
Jeff and John,
Yeah.
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having us.
thank
Yeah.
you for joining us. So we haven't actually talked about this on our podcast yet, but I discovered John and Jeff's glorious Jean Pod Van Dam cast recently that they started a few years ago, but I only just discovered. And so I binged every single Jean-Claude Van Damme centric episode. So I'm just dipping my toe into like the Bloodsport sequels and all the ancillary things.
Oh, man.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
There's something else.
Their show is like the podcast version of your binder, I think.
And of just my general media.
Yeah. Like, where's the binder? I don't know how we don't have the binder out.
I was gonna ask if there was the binder in room. Like when I heard
There it
that,
is.
Oh, there it is.
My gosh. Oh my gosh.
I'm not exaggerating. It's a 3-inch fucking binder of Jean-Claude Van Damme clippings. Like
Look at his muscles.
That's glorious.
that a grown
This is
man still
glorious.
contributes to. Like he still does it. I love it. Oh, I gotta
So
love you,
we've
Dave.
always
Rookie card.
talked about how Van Damme just has such amazing fans outside of the U.S. Like he just has these. Some people like create these beautiful, kind of hilarious photoshops that we find funny, but they are serious about it.
Like
It's
his
like
face
Van Damme with-
superimposed over a waterfall with like a tiger cub in the corner.
Yeah. And so
It's
like
magical.
I want
we
that
call
on a
them the
t-shirt.
innocent Van Damme fans. You know, we don't want people to corrupt them on the internet. But we were talking, and Dave, I think like you totally kill us on Van Damme fandom in the U.S. When I heard about the binder, the 3-inch binder, I was like, I gotta see this. This is absolutely amazing.
I didn't believe it.
Every time I see him, I'm like, you got to show me the binder. Like I got to make sure it still exists. And that thing has existed since we were in high school. Like and it's just been slowly growing and
so
slow.
beautiful.
It's amazing.
My wife
Do you have
shows
it insured?
Oh, I should. It's mostly like Inside Karate magazine clippings and stuff like that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I have to say also, you sent one of the greatest emails that I have ever seen in my life. Like,
Wow.
just a regular email, kind of the breakdown of us, what we might be talking about here. But I showed Jeff this, and he was like, "Was this a website?" I'm like, "I didn't even know you could do these things in an email. This is amazing."
Yeah.
We often joke that I have just enough going on in life not to moderate the Jean-Claude Van Damme Wikipedia page.
Because he's too busy working on his binder. How can he do both? Like,
Yeah, all
You need
kinds
to
of
scan
binders
that
in
thing,
here.
man.
yeah. Oh, geez.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for even showing us that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Little
I'm
glimpse.
jealous.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You
My-
need to digitize it now.
I know.
Yeah, you
live
really
on
do.
Forever. Yeah.
My wife shows that to anyone that comes in the house. It's almost like, here's where the bathroom is. And then she's like, here's who
Your
I'm
own
married
coffee
to.
table book. It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fantastic.
I don't think she's proud of me, though. It's definitely like...
Oh my God! Would you look at that?
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Like I do it out, like I poke fun just like any other friend. Like, you know, you bust your friend's balls because you admire things about them, right? Like, and that's what
Yeah,
you bust
exactly.
his balls about. And so that's what I do. But there is a little bit of like with the bride that I'm pretty sure is just like, yeah, a 3-inch binder. It's a 3-inch Jean-Claude Van Damme binder. Can you believe I married him? Can you believe that? Like, he's so lucky. Like, she'll say that he's so lucky. Like,
Well, and if you look it through here, I'll try to find one of them. There's a lot of just like pictures of a shirtless man. Like, here he is. And
With Heartstrowner on it.
yeah, pretty much. So there's an example. He's in his Hanes tidy underwear,
Oh,
like just
yes.
posing.
What? It's just a
Yes.
shirtless man posing.
Yeah.
I don't see the big deal
His
here.
underwear. It's fine. It's nothing weird about it. But I never noticed the homoerotic nature of my relationship with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
He's
until
a
I got
living
married.
statue. I'm sorry. It's just-
yeah.
Okay, I got to put it away. I'll
Of
get lost.
cocaine and roundhouse kicks and helicopter kicks.
It's just a couple of hours of silence as we're all just looking through the notebook.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, it's
Or is everyone ready to
awe-inspiring.
turn the
Yeah.
page?
Yeah, this is from Details, 1994. The quote, Details magazine. He's like, quote, "I have a normal dick." I remember that. That marked me as a child.
Oh, that's amazing.
Just to kind of familiarize our listeners, but also these are questions for me as someone who's binged your podcast recently. Just stuff I want to know. So, what was the original impetus for the Jean-Pod Van Damme cast?
Oh, that was all on John.
Oh man, so
Like-
gosh, it was one day I was just sitting there. I was kind of bored, wanting to put up a new show on the network and the Podbros network.
Yep.
And I was like, man, I really love Van Damme. I haven't seen too many Van Damme podcasts out there. This would be the perfect opportunity to do something like this. So I went on Twitter with a couple friends and I was just like, yeah, I'm thinking about, coming up with the Jean-Claude Van Damme podcast. And some friends and I went back and forth and we were joking around with them. We were like, hey, let's call it the Jean-Pod Van Damme cast. And so I went through, like I did my due diligence of like, hey, is there any other shows out there? At the time, no one had this very similar show. And so this was sometime in the summer, and it took me a while to actually get the ball rolling. Like Jeff and I sat down somewhere kind of around October, November-ish, I think. And we recorded quite a few episodes, and then we finally launched probably at the end in December. So like some of our stuff, we were like, hey, we got to pay attention that we're not too
Topical.
yeah. So like, cause we mentioned the Donald
like
Trump
we mentioned the
becoming
election,
president,
yeah.
at the time.
So it's
and so we were like-
2016, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And-
So
And the Podbros network was that already in existence at that point in time? Had you already started that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So I started Podbros up, like the idea of it came in 2013, started getting everything all in the summer. I guess I do a lot of my stuff in the summer. So created it in the summer, but then launched at the end of 2013. And we had a handful of shows up, like just some regular, like a promotional show that kind of promoted people on the independent scene with things, whether it was actors, directors, writers, and it kind of became more of a Metro Detroit type of promotional show. And then that expanded out. We had like a video game podcast at the time, a couple of guys. They were very World of Warcraft oriented. And so there was that. There was a guy who still does Dave's Nerd Compendium, which is like geek pop culture stuff. And we had on what really inspired the network was this original comic book show that I was a part of, where we actually sat and reviewed comic books.
Awesome.
And it was something at the time that it really, like, there wasn't anything out there that we felt was good. Like a lot of the comic book review podcasts that we saw were, oh yeah, I read that. That was good. You should read it.
Yeah.
And so we were like, thanks, like so we kind of, in the beginning, we went overkill with it. And we were like almost going page by page, and we were like, no one wants to hear that. So like we found a happy medium. We did that. Unfortunately, you guys know things just get busy, stuff falls out. So there was a lot of shows on the network, totally doing all their own things. And then stuff, it ebbs and flows. Like we'd have, at one point, we had over 40 or 50 shows on the network. And I was just like, oh, this is just getting crazy. And so we kind of went down, and we had a happy medium between like 20 and 30 shows, with Jean-Pod Van Damcast being a part of it.
Awesome.
Jeff's end of it, I'll let Jeff speak for himself, but he started out on some different shows, one that's still running right now, but that's a part of the network too. But you want to tell him a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I was in one. I first got introduced to podcasting. My buddy reintroduced me to John. We'd actually met without realizing it in like 2007,
maybe even earlier than that.
6 or 5.
Yeah, we had no clue at the time. He had long hair and I had short hair, and so it's kind of weird now.
It's like a natural balance, I guess.
Maybe you inspired
Eventually
each
we'll both
other.
have-
Yeah, like
Yep.
I should really grow my hair out, and man, I should cut this all off.
13 years later, finally.
Yeah.
But yeah, like my two friends came to me within a week, and they're like, "Hey, we should start a podcast." Like the two friends that didn't know each other at all. I was like, "Oh, all right, sure." I mean, I don't really have anything going on. The first was one. The premise was the show was called Flask Action Heroes, and the premise was we would review action movies while splitting a fifth of whiskey and drinking like a 6-pack, and then like by the end of the interview, we were just obliterated.
Oh my god!
Like we got a good.
Sounds like the Wrench episode.
Yeah, we did an episode that was a bunch of different friends of the show are bringing our favorite revenge movie to the table, and it was like a 4.5 hour just drunken mess.
And hell
yeah!
But like hour 2, it's like everybody slurring and just like
falling asleep,
trying to one up each other. Like, oh man, good. It was fun.
So we can relate.
Yeah,
That's
totally
a good time.
relate to that, yeah.
But yeah, the second one was another comic book podcast called Kapowcast. We mainly focus on like the MCU, the movies, the TV shows, things of that nature, local cons, stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. I think the thing that really like me and John, we would constantly reference Bloodsport and Cyborg, and he'd be the only one who understood when I like quoted it. I think it was really the thing of like, I mean, we quote it all the time. We have all these movies memorized back and forth. We might as well review them. And that's kind of how the ball got rolling on that.
Awesome. That's spectacular.
Yeah, I'm so glad it did.
Yeah.
I love that you do
you.
like one movie per episode. That's a real joy for me. Like I think it started for me when I was even younger, but by the time I was following Jean-Claude Van Damme's career, it was like a movie at a time, and I would obsess over one at a time. And so I have this like chronology in my head up to probably 2000-ish. It's like it was really clear. And so since I was old enough too, I remember, so clearly, like this was, Death Warrant. I saw Death Warrant in the theater in 1990. It was the first one I saw in the theater. And
wow,
that's awesome.
Hell yeah.
It was
It's like being on a podcast with 3 Daves. I love it. It's so awesome.
Funnily enough, like one of when Palmer and I first started, Palmer did a podcast in 2008.
WPLMR was that. I focused on it was like a legitimate radio show was the format. So I got a bunch of independent music, and I would play blocks, and then I would do like a a DJ in between those blocks, like it was a
Oh,
regular radio
sweet.
show.
Yeah, and skits.
Yeah.
No
sometimes,
kidding.
And
and
sketches and like
guests.
fake sponsors and
Yeah.
all that. Like everything was, but it was essentially a one-man show. Like I would do all the voices in the sketches. And,
Yeah.
all that. stuff.
Pitch modulate his voice and stuff like
Yeah.
that to help. But I mentioned that because I think of him as, and I used to work at a cable access center, and he did a movie review show there in like 1999. So between those two things, I just sort of think of him as a host of things like this, of TV shows and podcasts. And so we'd kind of fallen out of touch just in terms of like regular communication. And he made a trip out here, and we're talking on the back porch. And I'm just like, we should do a podcast.
Yeah. Well, we had a friend of ours when we were in high school. She asked me like how can I spend more time with Dave, and because she was trying to be more intentional on like individual connections with our group of friends. And I was like, and at the time he was putting essentially all of his time at the studio, because he'd work full time and then he'd work all night on his version of The Crow. And
Oh, nice.
and so I just looked her right in the eyes and I was like, if you want to spend more time with him, you got to make a show. Like, because I was hanging out with him regularly, like once a week, on top of when we would hang out at the cabin and stuff. And so, and that's how I got more time with Dave, was I just decided I wanted to make a show.
And that she meant that very practically, her question and his answer. But I realized that was a pretty profound and true statement then and now about how I spend time with people.
So that and that's how Long Walk Short Drink got, because we stayed up all night essentially doing Long Walk Short Drink, just like talking about all the stuff we love.
Talking, yeah.
And he's like, we should do a podcast, and that's how we got started.
But I mention all that because, like, in our very first session that we thought I think he thought we were going to be building towards something that would eventually be a podcast. But I was like, this is the first show. This is going to be something.
Yeah.
But within those and it was a 3-hour session, which pretty much set the template for the next few years.
Yeah.
But he said, and there's like, one of my goals, this is him talking, one of my goals for this podcast is to try to understand your love of Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I was exposed to like more sci-fi and horror when I was growing up. So, as I didn't have that's what my mom liked. And so I got to watch whatever she watched. And so I just didn't get exposure. I guess if there's any action star, it'd be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, I definitely followed his career, like Commando and Predator and
Predator.
Oh, yeah.
and like all like Predator was a
The
staple
classics.
growing up. Yep, Terminator. I loved all of those. Last Action Hero, like, is a fantastic movie. I love.
Oh, I love it. So underrated.
It is 100%.
You just rewatched that one, didn't you?
Yeah, and because I got that pinball machine, and so then. And Ash had never seen that movie,
Oh, man.
so we watched it. Yeah. So yeah, but it's one of those things. I know, like, there's plenty of things I'm super fans of that people just don't understand, but I love to understand people and the things that they like. So Jean-Claude Van Damme is one of those recurring things where I'm just like, I feel like an anthropologist sometimes. I'm just like, yeah, so why again? Like, you do. You subscribe to this online exercise thing just to watch it? Like, do you actually do the exercise?
Oh, I did it.
Like,
I still kind of do it. I can't get these guns.
I mean, he's walking around with his pants around his ankles. Like, is this even real? Like,
Yeah.
He's showing off the
does
calf
he mean to
muscles.
be funny, or is he not? No, this is
I
serious.
don't know. Yeah.
It can be hard to tell with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like, he does skirt the line between intentional humor and unintentional humor at times. Like, I think he's gotten pretty self-aware about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a situation in one of the Van Damme reality shows episodes where, like, his daughter Bianca farts in the car, and he makes such a big deal about it that he takes. I'm forgetting his friend's name, but he was a writer on. It might have been a part of Cyborg as well. But he's like, hey. Come here. And he's like, yeah. He's like, he's like, smell that in the car? And the guy's like, no, what? And by now, like, the car, like, all the doors were open. So, like, the fart had dissipated, you know? So he's expecting, like, he is such a funny, crazy dude that it's just like, you never understand him. He's like, she fart in car. You know?
Oh man. Yeah. No. I can definitely see the allure. It's just one of those things because I didn't have all that exposure growing up that, so I'm constantly just trying to figure it out because it's all surreal to me to look at it now as a grown up. So yeah, I love it.
And I think this for his anthropological, exploration of my love of Jean-Claude Van Damme or whatever, this will, I think, help this whole conversation.
Oh yeah, no, all this is like
podcasting goals.
Like I feel like I'm moderating like a group. Like there's more of you, like look, there's more of you. Look, aren't you excited? Like now I step back and like see how they interact, like who's gonna assert dominance and like all those things.
Gonna start trying to do the splits.
Yeah. Oh, man.
All right, pull in the chairs.
Yeah.
That hurts me just looking at it. I think you came up with a great idea, though. I think we need to find somewhere where we can actually convince some sort of comic convention, a geek pop culture convention, to have a Jean-Claude Van Damme panel with all of us.
I
go there.
Yeah,
I would do it.
Totally think that I would go to that. I would go to that convention just to see that. Like that's fantastic.
You have to. You got to moderate it for us now.
Yeah. No, definitely, because it's just so fascinating to me. I like there are a few things that I am super fans about, and otherwise I'm just like I just like everything, and so I totally get that. It's just that it is Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh yeah.
I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just like
not taken that way.
No, yeah. But I also like too your because we tried to approach that when we started our podcast too, of just throw as much against the wall as possible and just see what sticks, and what does stick, like just keep doing that and let the rest of the stuff like run away. Don't I think that's like a big thing that we've really discovered, and I think people who are starting out in podcasting is like, don't get set into a routine too early that you feel like you've painted yourself in a corner. Like, be willing to be organic, especially in the first 20 episodes or however many episodes. Like, don't try to do anything, just do what you want to do. Because I love Dave's mantra of like, interested is interesting. And I think that's why we can have whole episodes devoted to Cyborg, and you guys can have a whole show devoted to Jean-Claude Van Damme because you're so interested in it. It's worth listening to.
It's contagious.
It is contagious, and it's I love it. So
yeah, right. No, you're totally right there. I think one of the things when I'd have people come up to me, talk to me about like going to these podcast conventions and whatnot, saying stuff along the lines of like, "Oh, hey, yeah, we just started up our show," and me going, "Oh, what's your show about?" And they're like, it's two guys that get drunk and we just talk, and I'm like, that's fine, man. I know that's the running joke. That's right. It's the running joke. Hold on, let me guess what your podcast is. It's you guys getting drunk talking about stuff. How'd you know? And I'm like, well, that's how everyone starts, right? And then it breaks off from there. And so we start. You take an idea from one thing, and then this splits, and the next thing you know, you get an email from someone saying that. Hey, we like what you do, and here we are. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it is. It's totally awesome, and a great way to show like that podcasting is its own community too. Like we could, I guess people could argue like we're as like fanatic about podcasting as you guys are about Jean-Claude Van Damme. Like they don't really get it, but it's something fun and something that we do, so
keeps us in touch. That's the thing for us. Or for me, I should say, that I come back to when if things get overwhelming, if the scope of things or the approach or the production process or something, I was like, for me, the most important thing is about our show is to facilitate make sure that we're talking and connecting and don't lose touch.
Almost definitely.
And so we'll scale back accordingly sometimes.
Like a large group of my friends, we saw each other maybe 2-3 times a year tops before we started podcasting together. Now it's a weekly basis. We all see each other, keep in touch. I'm invited to their weddings. It's I don't know if I would have been otherwise.
Standing up in weddings.
Yeah.
With friends that you haven't. Yeah, you wouldn't expect it. It's kind of awesome. Like you just don't you don't expect something to come from what you would essentially call a hobby, and
Right.
then you just get to meet some awesome people with it, like Tony from Kapowcast. We've just been like through thick and thin with him, and I did not know Tony before I met him through the podcast thing, and literally we'll be in his wedding coming up next year.
Wow,
So
that's
like,
awesome.
I mean, we've just
Oh,
become
yeah.
great friends, and it's
Yep.
amazing the journey that we take with one another.
Oh, he has a copy of the Cyborg comic, by the way.
Yeah.
It's right next to the binder.
Uh-oh.
No, it's in the binder.
I remember you talking about him.
Hell yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
I am so jealous.
It looks like it's in good condition, too.
Yeah, I think the last one I looked up on eBay was going for like $40 in the UK, and we're
Oh,
like,
geez.
I can believe it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I paid. Probably too much, but I'm.
Worth every penny.
Yes, thank you.
But I totally get that that idea. I mean the running subtitle or unofficial title of our podcast is Dude Therapy. Just because we realized we started it to stay in touch, but then we realized after a certain point, like, we need this. It's not, at least I don't want to speak for Dave.
We do. Yeah,
I need that podcast. I need that time to sit down and be able to connect with my friend who's been a big part of my life for so long. And it really made, because he's not exaggerating. Like, we had gone like 5 years without really speaking.
Yeah, not intentionally.
Not intentionally. It just happened.
Yeah.
oh yeah, exactly, yeah.
My wife and I took that road trip, and we were going to pass within 4 hours of Northfield. And so we were like, hey, can we swing by and just like, and it worked out. And then that led to the show.
I'm so glad that happened.
Yeah. But now I couldn't imagine not having Long Walk Short Drink.
No, and I go to actual therapy, but I make sure it's on off weeks from our show so that I'm covered. And I tell my therapist that. It's like, oh, no, I can't do that week. That's just going to be like doubling up.
Yeah.
So
But it's nice to know that like you guys are experiencing that too, which again, if for anybody that is listening to this and think you would know what you would talk about, or you don't know what you would do, just get on a microphone and start recording it. And and you never know, it could take off, you know.
yeah,
So,
if nothing else, for yourself
for
and your
yourself. Yeah,
relationships.
that's what yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did you settle upon the format of the show? Like, how did you go from the idea of like, let's do a show about Jean-Claude Van Damme to like, we'll do one episode per movie and we'll have these split scales and the synopsis section, and anyway, how did all that evolve?
You know, sometimes it feels like when I'm hanging out with Jeff, I'm just talking in a mirror. It's like scary. There's actually an episode where we joked about being on the same brain wavelength because we just kept finishing each other's
Sandwiches.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
and
I
so
like
we were just dying. And in the beginning, just with like throwing it out there, I was like, hey man, I'm thinking about doing the Jean-Claude Van Damme podcast, and what should we do? And so we went through all his tropes and whatnot, like the titular lines. We were like, what is something that is almost in every Van Damme film? And obviously splits. Everyone knows him about splits. What we didn't know later on was car chases are a huge thing in later Van Damme films. So like that was a pleasant surprise for us. But yeah, we wanted to take things that like everyone could relate to and laugh at. They're like, all right, nut punches. Is there any hits to the groin? Are there any headbutts? And so it really, and for us, with the epitome, everyone knows Van Damme for splits. So we're like, let's just call it a split scale, And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how that got started the way it did. And it was one of those things that if you asked me who came up with what nowadays, I feel like I'd have to say, well, it was both. Like
I can't remember exactly.
we knew everything that we wanted to do, and we played around with it, and we were like, also wanted to see some of Van Damme's films in the 2000s that we had not seen.
Yeah.
Because it was like, hey, everyone loves Van Damme in the 80s and the 90s, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, did you see Van Damme? And yeah, that was a good one. So we felt like we owed it to ourselves to, just push forward and watch some of these movies, and then to find some gems in the 2000s and the 2010s. but to also find some stinkers as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like
yeah.
Derailed.
Yeah.
Oh, dear God.
I love when you said in one of the episodes, it's like, well, it's not Black Eagle bad. And I think you heard at least part of our Cyborg episode where we talked about Cyborg, but my brother, who, he grew up the same house as me and Levin Van Dam, and somehow that was the movie that Van Dam was focused on in our show. But Palmer didn't love it. And my brother at one point, he just says offhandedly, he's like, it could have been worse. It could have been Black Eagle, which he has no idea what that would entail. But it was funny to me.
Yeah. Oh man.
But I noticed in the first one, the first few, it seemed like, and I didn't double check, but it almost seemed like you were maybe reading the Wikipedia synopsis. But as it went along, it seemed as though you were making your own rundown of how things go. Was there something like that to where a shift?
No, it all came from IMDb. I think there was one episode where I lost my notes or something crashed. The document went corrupted. So I did have to use Wikipedia as like my plot synopsis, like going, okay, I totally forgot what was in this because it was watching pretty much a bunch of Van Damme films at once,
Right.
and trying to remember which one did he kick the dude in the nuts in, which one did he kick the guy in the,
All of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. So, we probably could have got away with it too.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, yep." And this one,
And
this
the part
is what
where he
happens.
screamed, he was like, ah! Oh, it was great.
I love too when you're kind of critiquing the synopsis, like, oh, well, that was a shitty one. Like so-and-so, you like their name.
yeah.
Or like,
So they
did our job
everything-
for us in this one.
Yeah, it all came from IMDb, and
Just us
really,
adding our own, as
just-
we went along with it.
I'd sit there and I'd go through the notes, and it got to the point where I was like, well, I don't want to do it like the comic book show. I was like, I don't want to do a line by line review of each one of these movies. However, there's so much gold in it. We were like, all right, let's just take some of the fun parts that we remembered that we can laugh at, or that were just like, that was so ridiculous, and we'll use those. And in a lot of the movies, a lot of it's there. And in some of the movies, you're just like, okay, that was the only saving grace in this. Or,
Yeah.
So it really was just kind of a breakdown. The only one time did we actually use Wikipedia really to kind of be our crutch for us, just because of my notes getting lost. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that goes with any show, right? You go through it, and then all of a sudden you have this just this pattern, this everything's simple to you now, and so you just jump into it. And we were hoping to do something very similar now that we finished up with Van Damme, moving on to Nicolas Cage and Kurt Russell.
I told him that yesterday.
Yeah.
His eyes got so big.
Yeah, hey, now that one I might be. I think I could do a few of those. Raising Arizona, Con Air.
Yes.
Oh, hell
yes.
Oh, but you're going to talk,
Mandy.
I hope, in Con Air about how they basically ripped off the Hard Target getup for.
See?
If you look, I did a side by side photo. It's like even the still shot of him running away, Cage running away from the helicopter blowing up, and Van Damme running away from an explosion. The same tank top, jeans, and mullet.
That mullet, yeah.
I'm like, they're trying to.
Mullet.
I think he's onto something.
Just for that one. I'm not saying like
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is always ripping off Van Damme, but
That's awesome.
or I don't know.
No,
if
we'll
he
go
saw
further
it.
down the rabbit hole and see what else we can find on that one.
Exactly.
Did
I'll
you
send
guys
you that
watch
picture.
Mandy? Speaking it, did you?
Love Mandy.
We all go,
Oh my
man.
gosh, that movie changed my life. It was on my like best of 2018 list, in my top 10 and everything. I felt like it was Nicolas Cage like returning to being
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage again, which was just so fantastic. The bathroom scene right after she dies,
I know,
like,
the crying and the
oh
yeah.
my
Oh
god!
my.
Like and he just stays on him, like the camera doesn't move, and just how like he just ramps up and it gets absurd. You're like, this is just silly, and then
Yeah.
it goes past silly to where you're like, this poor man, like go fucking kill
I
those
know.
people, like oh,
You really felt like you're watching someone's mental breakdown,
Yeah,
like live
yeah.
on camera, which we might have been because he's
Yeah.
quite
I
the
was gonna
method
say-
actor. Yeah,
He's not afraid to die
It
with honor.
looks exactly what's happened to us in real life.
yeah. Oh man, yeah. So yeah, no, I would totally be in for that Nick Cage stuff. That's fantastic.
When will that one launch? I know you were banking some episodes.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. I was
Yeah.
hoping that this was already launched, but hiccups and whatnot. I still need to make the music for the intro and everything for it, and do a couple little things. But I'm hoping we can get at least 10 in the can, and then we'll launch it. So that way we'll have a little bit of a break, so that we can go on our little what we usually do and try to watch 2 or 3 movies per week. And then that way we'll always have an episode out. So
Yeah.
consistency and keep going with that, because that's the one thing that I found just as like a podcast fan with some of your favorite podcasts, when you're like, oh, what happened? They're not out at the usual time, and you get a little bit bummed. And so I'm like, all right, let's try to create a backlog where this would never happen.
Yep.
Plus, if you stop recording, just oh, I'm taking a break, that, it's just like college. You're like, oh, I'm taking a break. And the next thing you know, it's 6 months later. It's a year later.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of music for the
good
Nicolas
segue.
Cage show, I love the music you have for the Jean Pod Van Dam cast. Where did you make it? Where did it come from?
Yeah. So that was just basically one of those platforms where they give you just simple beats, like, maybe a second or 2 worth of clips, and then you just kind of create your own stuff with it. And so I'm trying to remember what one that one came from, if that one came from an online support service, or if that one actually, I downloaded I did one of those Humble Bundles packs, like this Music Pro Maker, I think was the name of it. I can't remember. And I downloaded a bunch of the different samples that came with it as well. And so I played around with it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like it would be in a Van Damme film. And so I sent it to Jeff, and he was like, hell yeah.
Hell yeah!
That's one of my favorite things about the podcast, periods, is Jeff's hell yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And,
That's delightful.
we knew it just had to stick. It just,
Yeah. It's like John Carpenter over here.
Yeah,
Jeez.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that you made it. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
great.
That song.
Yeah, thank you.
It's one of those
Thank
things
you,
I
yeah.
hear it just makes me happy. I'm like, oh boy, I'm in for it.
Yeah.
You're
Starting
too
up,
kind.
yes.
And it does sound like, I mean, the little I know of Jean-Claude Van Damme, it does sound like something that would be in one of his movies, which
Yeah,
is great. It's
yeah.
very fitting. Very fitting.
That's awesome.
Thank you. That's what I was going for. And like when I played around with some stuff, and like that one just really fit. Like I was like, this feels like we're getting ready for an 80s VHS film put in play, and so here we go.
Adjust the tracking.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, glorious.
Oh, man.
My first question about very Jean-Claude centric, and then I'm going to turn it over to yours because his is a way better question. But I'm just curious. So if I'm remembering correctly, I can't remember which of you it was. I want to say it's maybe you, John, that you came to it around age 4, starting to see Van Damme movies on TV. Is that right? Do I have the wrong guy?
I mean, it's pretty much the same
Yeah,
for both
I was
of
around the
us.
same age for both of us.
Yeah.
So what was the first one you respectively each of you saw in the theater?
That's a great question, because I really have to think about that. My family was like always VHS rental store family. So I can, gosh, the first Van Damme, it might have been Street Fighter.
Oh, nice.
So it was a while before. And I don't know. I don't know why my mom just never took us to, maybe because some of them were rated R, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I guess if you're taking a bunch of boys, but it was back in the day, though. It was the 80s.
Yeah.
Everything's all right. It's fine.
80s
Hell
I wish
yeah.
they would get rid. Hell yeah! I wish they would get rid of PG-13 and just go back to 80s PG, because that was
I know.
it was just such a
Seriously.
golden era of film. I don't know if it's because we're nostalgic for
Truly.
it, but like they could just get it. Like Goonies, for example. Like those kids say shit. That's what kids say
Yeah.
when there's no adults around. Kids say shit. Like
Exactly.
that's what they do. I said shit
Yeah.
all the time. So
Yeah, so
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it was like my mom was afraid what people might think or something. You bring in these kids like to a rated R film or what? I don't know. But we'd always watch Van Damme films at home, like after rental store, just basically going, seeing the next one, and just being in awe. But yeah, I think Street Fighter might have been the first Van Damme film I saw in theater. What about you, Jeff?
My parents weren't actually big. I was like the only big Jean-Claude Van Damme fan in my family. Like my brothers, I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters. They weren't really big into it. Like my family, they were sci-fi nerds, you know. So we mainly watched like, I mean, I like sci-fi too. Don't get me wrong. Like we'd watch Star Trek: The Next Generation all the time and stuff like that. If they did watch any action movies, it'd either be like RoboCop or an Arnold flick, which I also love. Like I love those to death.
Yeah.
But I think the only one I convinced them to was also Street Fighter, because like they had the action figure line out and everything.
Yep.
They're like, oh, okay, we'll take you to see this, you know. And it was an amazing experience.
That's awesome.
The Van Damme theater going experience that I remember best, or is most remarkable, I should say, was Lionheart. It was not that many.
You saw Lionheart?
I did, yeah.
Oh man.
So I was in. So it's not, I don't want to out your ages, but so I was still pretty young, but I think so 1990, early 91. I would have been like around 10ish, I guess.
11 or 12.
Well, no, 79. So I'm like 1 year back. Anyway, my
91
not
be
my
12.
strong suit. But this was like January 91,
Oh, okay.
so I wouldn't have turned. But so, but my parents would take me, thankfully, and sometimes it was awkward, you know, nowhere to run, sitting next to my mom during the love scene. I was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
I could not imagine you watching that a sex scene next to your mom. I know your mom. That's funny.
Yeah.
Now,
And
Dave,
oh, man,
do you know
actually-
what this is?
And Double Impact was the worst, because I remember, you know, that kind of wild fantasy love scene
Yes.
with the lights. Yeah.
Did you get your eyes covered?
I did it. She didn't cover my eyes or anything, and believe me, I was 12
Just
then,
awkward
so
silence.
I was pretty happy about it.
Oh, man.
But I remember coming back, because we were on vacation at her sister's house, and it must have been my mom to take me. That's where I got this signed portrait. It was just this not really signed. It's not signed.
That's
It's
the
not
third
signed.
time the binder's
It's
made an appearance.
it was just given out at that screening, and it was not
That is
signed
so
for real.
amazing.
It's just
Yeah.
I have 2 of them. They're both like faded
Still.
by. But I remember coming back, and my mom saying to my dad, she was like, "Oof, it was a pretty potent love scene. There's like a lot of leaning back." Like, oh my god. But anyway, so Lionheart,
man.
at the end, you know, where they all start to slow clap, like
Yeah.
Yes.
they did that in the theater.
Bets.
The
They
audience-
did.
Yeah,
Oh.
the audience did. And it was not that many people, but it was still awesome.
What a magical moment.
It was
Wow.
You're all you're all bound together by JCVD.
It was
That's
glorious.
So fantastic.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh.
And then I think the last one I saw in a theater was the movie JCVD in 2008. We
sweet.
Pumps, our friend Pumps,
Yeah.
who has been on the podcast a little bit, but it was just me and my wife and him and his wife and maybe like 2 other people in this like art house cinematheque in Cleveland. And at the end of the movie, Pumps stood up and just goes. He tried to start and his wife like stopped him. So that was kind of a bookend of
That's fantastic.
but so you've got this great question.
Yeah, I do. And so, first of all, I thank you so much for just letting me. I was really intimidated about having this conversation just because I did not know what I would be able to contribute to it at all. Because again, I really take this like anthropologist position when it comes to JCVD on our podcast.
He doesn't have a binder.
I don't have a binder, and like here's a great example because Dave is like, oh no, that's awful. Like my best reference to JCVD for the bulk of my life was Time Cop because that was like his like sci-fi
man.
crossover, you know, and,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
love time travel movies. So like
Time
I'm going
Cop
to see
is
anything with time travel.
Saying matter cannot matter when matter.
We were coming up like with ways I could contribute to the show. And at one point it was like, well, I have some questions and you can just share my questions and ask those. And I was like, no, I want to contribute. So the only thing I could come up with, this was the only question. I ran it by him and he's like, that's fantastic. So here's the question. If you could have one JCVD superpower, which one of these three would you have? And would you want the helicopter kick? Would you want the jump split defense? Or would you want to be able to headbutt anybody you wanted with no physical ramifications to yourself?
Oh, so you mean like
I went a little bit of Van Damme there too.
You mean like jumping up in a
I know.
like
I
this?
love your shirt.
It's
By the way.
amazing.
Yeah, like that. But
like
you know
you're
how he does
kicking
in
one
Time
person
Cop
in each
where he
side?
like jumps
Yeah.
into like they're shooting him with lasers and he
Totally
jumps and
prevents
does
the electrocution.
To like, you know what I mean?
50,000
Oh, yes,
volts,
yeah.
motherfucker.
Yeah, yeah, yes, hell yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So if you were gonna have one of those, if you could have one JCVD superpower of those three, because I feel like those are his big like
Yeah.
staples. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one would
Yeah.
you want?
Let's see. I'll go first.
Yeah, you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that's cool. I would definitely go with the splits. I mean, it's by far the most impressive. I mean,
Yeah. That's a good answer.
I would use it constantly, even when it wasn't warranted.
Yeah.
Like I'd be sitting in my break room at work, just doing the splits between two chairs.
Yeah, and you just find
Eating my
excuses to
lunch.
call people in so they
Drinking
can like see
coffee.
you doing it.
I don't know if you can see this. These are both gifts. This is him from Bloodsport doing the split between two chairs on a coffee
Yes.
cup, and he's holding a coffee cup here. You can barely see with the other hand out, and he's doing the
That's
split
glorious.
instead of two chairs. It's two coffee beans,
Bags of coffee.
bags of coffee
Yeah.
beans. Yeah, it makes me so
that is
happy.
amazing.
Where did you find that?
Yeah, where did you get that cup at? Not to
My
cut from the
sister-in-law
question,
gave it to me. I think she just and this too. My father-in-law gave me. I think they just searched like Van Damme joke gifts on
Yeah.
Amazon.
That
and it
is
comes up.
Hell yeah.
But, yeah, that's a good answer.
Awesome.
I love that you would use it in
Yeah.
like when it's not warranted. That's my favorite part of the
Yeah.
answer.
John, how about you?
That's the tough thing. I was thinking the same thing just because of all the times where I could have used it where I didn't have the chance to. And so, you know, I got hit in the low belt there. So it might have to be, but man, to be able to headbutt someone without it actually hurting.
Yeah.
That was
Like I've been close, you know, I know on the show I had mentioned it too. It was probably 10 years ago now or so. I did Muay Thai for a little bit. So like the spinning helicopter kicks and stuff like that, I could get to that point. Never could get to the splits though. I got close, but like not Van Damme-esque. But to be able to headbutt someone without it actually hurting would be pretty awesome. Of course, I'd have to have probably like that cyst that he already has on his forehead. So I think
sides.
that's where it really like his protection comes from. And I just
Nature's
don't have
bicycle
that.
helmet.
Source of its power.
Yeah. It's like his
gift.
skull is faceted for headbutting. You're like,
Yes.
I'm looking
Yes,
at the
right.
posters behind me, and
Yeah.
it's pretty pronounced. Sometimes more than others.
Well, that side on the cyborg one, it actually looks like a shield. His forehead. I mean, just like, I just imagine there's just like a bone that runs through to the back of his skull, so it's like a Newton's cradle.
Yeah.
hitting, like when he, like, oh man, yeah,
I would have to say the helicopter kick.
Yeah?
Because that in some ways employs the splits also. Because you're
Oh,
gonna,
yeah.
like you basically
true.
jumping up in the air, turning around in the air while doing a split.
Yeah.
So I could
Yeah.
kind of do it when I was like 11 or 12, maybe 13, 14, and then it kind of stopped. And I have like I used to make action movies with a different friend before I knew Palmer, and we would play all the parts and like,
Yeah?
just
That's
excuse for me
awesome.
to use these movie martial arts tricks that I'd learned. And recently, in the last like couple of years, progressively get more and more healthier. I just turned 40, and so I'm having to find ways to do that. And I hate working out. I hate working out.
Yeah.
But I was like, what would be fun? And I actually came from the podcast too. I met someone that's a friend of his from Dayton through the podcast, and we were joking about like becoming friends through the podcast, and it was something about
is when we were gonna go to Des Moines
Yeah.
for Star Wars, and Twinkie got the Airbnb, and I was like, if it has a garage, we got to go do karate in the garage.
and I was like, that sounds amazing.
And from Step Brothers, like that's a reference
Yes,
to Step
yes.
Brothers.
Did we
and-
just become best friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't remember that part though, so I was just like, oh yeah, let's definitely do karate in the garage. And funnily enough, I had gotten, and it was like a 2014 Blu-ray of No Retreat, No Surrender. And
Yes.
and there's
Nice.
an interview with I can't remember the actor's name, the guy who plays Jason Stillwell, like the lead character. And he still looks pretty good, is in pretty good shape. And he says, like, yeah, I still do martial arts. I, go out through the garage and, stay in shape. I think inspired by these two things, I decided I was going to start trying to do this. So I cleaned out a corner of my garage, and I started by hanging a paper on a string, just a regular 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I had gotten this trick from Bruce Lee books. Like it was one of the things he would say for home training. This, things like published.
Yeah,
in
the
the
Jeet
70s.
Kune Do, like secret techniques.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
For like the
Yep.
punch, you hang the paper and so you can snap and all that.
Yep.
And so I started with that to see if I could get in the habit, and I did, and I've been having a great time. Now I've got like a heavy bag out there that's filled with water.
Yeah.
And so I'm just go to town and I have a blast. But I
Nice.
made it a goal for
Yeah.
this year to try to get up to my flexibility to be able to do the helicopter kick. And I can do a half
dude.
of one. Like I can extend like the one leg, okay, but the other one, whenever I try to do the other one, I barely make it off the ground. So I need that superpower. If
Yeah.
I'm going to have any of them, I want to be able to do that. And I would definitely use it. I mean, there's never a good use of that. Like, that's never like a good idea in a fight, I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's never not a good use for it. Are you kidding me?
Well, there's never a practical one, I should say.
I would run screaming if that was somebody's go-to move.
Yeah.
If I was gonna get in a fight with somebody and they were like, I saw them helicopter kick somebody, I'd be like, I'm out. Like, you win.
Yeah, that's all you have to do. You just stand there, you do the one, and everyone's like,
All right.
all right, either you're
Done.
so ridiculous that this fight's just not going to happen,
Yeah.
or like you're really going to kick my ass.
Yeah.
I don't want to go either way.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
You don't want to take the chance.
Exactly.
No. No.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
I think I'd have to go with the headbutt. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
would not use that power for good though. I would just be randomly headbutting people. You pissed me off! Like just every time, just like every time. Like
Come here.
Yeah, I'd be like,
No, not the headbutt. Not the headbutt. Get over here now.
you asked for it. Yeah. Still. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So I would be on some list. Just crossing the country, just headbutting people. That would just be what
You
I
have to
would do.
register
Like-
your head in each
Yeah,
state you
yeah.
visit.
Oh, all of those. Yes, yeah. I couldn't wear a hat because it would be considered a concealed weapon. That is a ripoff of a Chuck Norris joke, by the way. Yeah, he can't wear pants because in some states because it's considered a concealed weapon. Like,
That's awesome.
so
I call back to my father, and they say he's the punching ball of Chuck Norris, and I had a bird. I left a bird. It died of sadness. Stop, Gladys! I speak my heart to the camera.
They see JCVD doing coke. JCVD done. He's crazy.
I got goosebumps when I saw you guys were gonna do that, because I did the same thing. I had to order a European. I watched on YouTube when it first came out, the reality show, and
yes.
and I eventually got a region-free DVD player just to have a physical copy of that program. And so when you guys were talking about it, I could see that it was in the list that you did each episode. I was like, yes. But listening in order, the saga of trying to get it and procure it was, I don't know. I enjoyed that as well. It's like, how is it going to happen? How are they going to get it?
awesome.
Will they get it?
Yeah.
I have enjoyed it so much. I can't tell you. I mean, I don't think I've ever met anyone that actually likes Jean-Claude Van Damme half as much as I do. So to know that there are, I mean, obviously there's got to be people like that out there. He had a very successful
we are having
career.
that Jean-Claude Van Damme convention and panel discussion. Like
Yes.
that's gonna
Yes.
happen.
But to hear you guys talk about it has just been such a delight. And,
Yeah.
I really appreciate.
I mean, that's
yeah, you do.
That's the
That's
whole
the
reason
re-
we did
thank
it.
you so
Yeah.
much. I
Connect
mean-
with
Yeah.
other people
yeah, that's
with
partially
a
it.
shared
Like,
passion.
Yeah.
yeah, we knew that there was at least U.S. fans still.
Yeah.
I mean, you go elsewhere, they're absolutely crazy for them,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of so much so we weren't expecting anything. The funniest thing about like this show for us was this kind of was our mental break show out of doing all the other shows.
Right.
So even though we were putting work into this one, this is the one like that we just had the most fun with. We could be just the goofiest with,
Right.
and we could do an episode where we're just quoting stuff back to each other, laughing. And it wasn't that long ago that I got an email from some online stats community thing telling us, congratulations, you guys are in the top 10 for film and television in Sweden. And I was like,
So awesome.
what the fuck?
Yeah.
I just love that there's like, because they're like the neutral, right? They stay neutral, the Swiss.
Oh,
yeah.
They don't.
Yeah,
get
so they have to get that out, and the only way they can get that out is through JCVD. Like, this is he's a pressure release, like,
Those helicopter kicks, man.
yeah. Oh man, is that awesome?
It's so interesting, like how sometimes he comes up. Like just recently, I was at like that drugstore we'll go to get you the cold medicine you need.
Oh, yeah.
I am a huge Bruce Lee fan now as well, and now that there's the family company run by his daughter and stuff, they have regular merchandise, and so they're putting out these collector's edition magazines that like kind of volume 1, whatever, and so through 4, I think they're up to 5 now. So I try to find them like in stores, but I never know where I'm gonna run across one. So I ran across one at this drugstore. I take it to the counter. It's like $10-$12, but whatever. And the guy checking me out, he was a little, I couldn't tell his age. He's definitely maybe my age or older. Had an accent as though maybe he grew up in a different country or something like that. But he's like, oh yeah, Bruce Lee. He's like, oh yeah, I like Bruce Lee. I grew up like in martial arts films and stuff. He's telling me, he's like, yeah, I saw this movie on TV, Cyborg.
Yes.
He's like, I got hooked. I'm like, are you kidding me? Cyborg of all movies?
Of all
And
the
that's what
movies.
hooked you. Like,
That's what hooked this guy.
Oh man.
And then my wife goes to physical therapy, and her physical therapist, I don't know how this came up, but turns out she told him about how I like Jean-Claude Van Damme, or I don't know how she found out, but he liked Jean-Claude Van Damme. And so there would be these back and forths. She would come home and tell me about things he said. And I don't know, maybe I asked, like, what's his favorite movie? And she comes back, tells me it's The Quest.
Wow. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what
Not
to say
that
about
that's a bad movie,
Yeah, no,
but that's
that's
just
so
so random
random.
choice.
Good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it is. It's usually like the older ones. It is.
Yeah.
Bloodsport
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Cyborg or
Yeah.
Kickboxer.
Maybe
Yeah.
Double Impact.
Oh,
Yeah, I did a I
Time cop.
did a list on my Facebook page with friends. I was like, "Hey, I'm doing a poll. What's the first movie that you think of when you think of Van Damme?" And that's what happened. We got a lot of Street Fighters, a lot of Universal Soldiers.
Oh,
That
yeah,
one surprised me a lot too. And then you'd have like the one-offs like No Retreat, No Surrender, and I'm like, "Oh, stop it! You're just trying to do that on purpose now."
trying to throw off the curve.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was funny, like
The Quest.
one of the movies you guys did in talking about those mid 2000s sort of surprises, and is it Damon that came on for Until Death? Wait, or
Yes.
no? Is that the right one? Until Death, yes. Because
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Because we always have that conversation saying the exact same thing.
is it
that
Until
the
Death
one?
or,
Yeah,
or Wake
yeah.
of Death? And so
It's not sudden death.
Oh,
It's not
yeah.
death warrant. It's not.
I became truly confused though, and you guys as to whether or not I'd seen it, because I stopped the because you guys were talking about it in such a way of like, oh, this is going to be a fun one, and it was a longer one. I thought that was a good sign for a good conversation, but with the way you were talking about the beginning of the plots and stuff, I was like, I don't think I've seen this, like, or did I not watch it because I just thought I'd seen it because of Until Death from a couple years before? So I watched the movie. I'm like, this is insane. This is great. And it's not until the very last scene in like some warehouse or something that it came back to me. It's like, oh, I did see this, but for whatever reason. And that's such a crazy movie. Like he plays this coke. It's like Bad Lieutenant, but with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh man.
And then it gets into
Yes.
this other thing when he has the brain injury. Oh my God. But I don't understand how it's even possible for such a super fan like to get to this very final scene and then be like, oh, I guess I've seen it. But that's the only part of it I remembered, is that.
Wow.
So that was one of the few that I watched because of your review alone, like,
Oh,
it
that's
fired me
awesome.
up. And a lot of them, some of them I haven't seen. You've maybe spared me. I haven't seen
Oh
Swelter.
yeah, yep.
No, not Swelter. Enemies Closer. But I'm curious about that one because of your review. But yeah,
It's awesome.
I've had such a blast with it.
I had to say I lost it, and I might have said this in the email, but the talking about your girlfriends back in elementary school, and you're like, Fender.
It's like the girl coming up to me like,
What's wrong
Joanna
with
wants
you?
to know what's wrong with you.
Fender.
Finger? Fender. I was a weird kid. I'm a
It
weird
just,
adult.
oh man, it was like it was innocence, and it is something that a little child would have done. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that is something I would have done too. Like, just,
I'm glad to hear.
is everything okay? Fender.
Oh man.
Like I said, I got through a lot of my biggest questions, but I did share a bunch of things with you guys that I didn't know if you were aware of because you hadn't talked about them specifically on the podcast. And it was so much, I can imagine you have not had a chance to look at any of it. But was there any of that stuff that you're like, ooh, we got to unpack this together? Or anything?
Dude, I had
anything you
no
wanna
a
talk
lot of it. I had no clue of, or I forgot
Yeah.
about it. It's like the Van Damme emojis. Like I forgot all about those. I had no clue that Van Damme tried to do his own like exercise video. So your clips of that, the best of, holy shit, that's
Classic,
awesome.
right? Like when he's like duck walking with his pants around his ankles
Oh,
and the
man.
like terrible dye job on his hair, like, oh my god, like all of it. It's just like when I saw that stuff, I was like, yeah, I get it now. Like I get this obsession with this guy. Like,
I love he was like, I am sorry, friends, for my accents. I was just in Hong Kong. I'm like, what are you talking? Dude, your accent's the same, man. Like,
I forgot about
That doesn't make any sense. No. The one that really got me though, like there's so many fun things, but that story he tells at the end of one of the lessons that I put at the end of
Yes!
the compilation video, where he basically says, he's like, I was kidnapped in Russia, and then he just goes, like, oh, he's like, oh, I guess we're talking about this now.
like it fucking happens all the time. Just another day.
you know.
Oh man.
Like doing the jump kick to kick down the door.
Yeah.
But
It was
then
the
he goes,
hinges
other-
of the door.
I saw it on the other side of the door, and I jumped like, wah!
So that I am Bruce Lee flying in the air kick. Oh man.
And
That
then
was
it-
another thing too. I was really wondering like if we were all just gonna do our own Van Damme personalities, like our own impressions of them.
Seems so.
oh, that's fitting. It's
hard
very
not
fitting.
to.
Yeah.
But that thing when that clip ends, when he's just like, otherwise I wouldn't be here talking to you now. My flesh would be with the pigs and my teeth thrown in a lake. I'll talk to you next time.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, my teeth in the ocean. And, yeah, man. Holy.
That's you just realize he lives in a totally different world than we do. Like
Yeah.
and
Even
and
for
that's
a
very
celebrity,
admirable.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, he's a
Like,
special
even
guy.
his like the reality show when he's talking with one of his very questionable Ukrainian friends, and
His
he's
business
like,
partner,
he buys me the good. What's the fish? Caviar.
Yeah.
He buys me the good one. You know, you're just like he is a child.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Man.
What was the story? I love that story that you were telling me where like he was on the set of something and he was like super coked out and he like called somebody into his trailer just to like see him like working on
Oh,
that
the side
one
bicep.
that
Yes.
one muscle
Yeah.
like just like making them watch it like while he's sweaty by himself in the trailer and like
Yeah.
oh
I don't know why, but I learned a lot about Cyborg
Yeah.
because of that German DVD, the Slinger.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
That was a treasure
So
trove.
much on that. There's like a 15-minute thing or whatever before, and it's weird because like some of it will play on a regular. I don't know if it's like the DVD or the Blu-ray. One of them will
Yeah.
play in U.S. players, and the other one won't. And the one, but now you have a region free. I'm sure you could pop in that other disc or whatever. But yeah, Albert Pian does this like he does a commentary track. It must be on the European disc. It's not on the Blu-ray because it's for it's kind of accompanies the VHS looking version, not the one that has like interspersed the high def shots.
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But before the commentary kicks in is when he starts telling all these other stories, and he talked about, and this is actually pre-drugs and stuff. This would be 1988, I guess, where he's like, because there was that period like where Bloodsport was shot but it hadn't come out yet, and so I think he kind of not got out of shape, but he was in that tremendous shape, and then he got on the set of Cyborg and stuff and was trying not to show his body. I guess he was like building it up, and Peon's just like, what is, we got to shoot things. And there are even a few shots he mentions that are like not Van Damme, that just because Van Damme hadn't come out of his trailer yet and stuff.
That's so wild. He is very self-conscious about his body, though. Like, you could tell,
And
it's his brand. You can tell. Like it's his brand. That's what he's trying to sell. So,
and when he was talking about on the reality show, that thing when he's at the church and he's like, ask God to help him save the world, and he's like,
oh yes,
yeah, he hadn't seen, but he's in. I made a film about it, full love, and he goes, I think I failed, and he like crouches down, and starts crying. He's like, I was trying to look too good for the camera, and
yeah, man.
What would this just popped into my head because I'm interested on this. So the likelihood of somebody stumbling across this just haphazardly is probably slim, but if it's somebody like me who is just fascinated about this obsession with JCVD, what would be a good entry movie, do you think? I've asked Dave this a couple times, and that's how we ended up with Cyborg. So what would you suggest, both of you guys, as a good entry? Like, if you want the epitome of JCVD, this is what you should look at, and this is a great representation of this passion that we have for him.
Oh, that's a great question. That's tough. I think, and I believe we talked about it just a little bit earlier, kind of in brief mentioning was the fact that it does come down to basically nostalgia for something.
Yeah.
And I don't know what your ties are, what your stories are for your the feelings why you love Van Damme so deeply, but like, to me, it's Bloodsport. Like, that's the one for me, because on top of that, not only do I feel like, okay, you got a little bit of everything, you even get the stuff outside of Van Damme, but also just that the personal relationship that I have with it. It's one of the times where, like, my brothers and I are all our age differences are just across the scale. And Van Damme is one of the only times that I can really remember where we all just kind of sat down and watched a film together.
Wow.
Where it wasn't like, I'm still a small child in the late 80s, and my brothers are a little bit older. And so they don't want to watch like cartoons and stuff at that time that I'm watching. And Van Damme was the key thing. And of course, having older brothers, you obviously, like, as a younger sibling, looking up to them. So like, somewhere in my little mind, I was like, holy shit, there must be something cool about this guy.
Right.
And then seeing him, and I built up, just how crazy great Van Damme was in my head. And it all stems from Bloodsport for me. So like,
Awesome.
Bloodsport, I feel, is just kind of like it. And then to understand, I feel even more so, and I believe you kind of mentioned this in the Cyborg episode too, jumping from an 80s film, pick your 80s film of Van Damme, and then jump to JCVD in 2008.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy shit, you really understand. I think this guy he believed in his own brand as well so much.
Right.
That like, he even is just kind of caught up in it, and he even questions why people like him.
Yeah.
And it's just
well, and that's always the thing. I remind myself of that monologue from that movie anytime I'm just like, I don't want to take him seriously, and I'm just like, but he can act, because that monologue is gut wrenching to watch, and,
right.
And I only know about it through Dave, and you go and you find it and you watch it and you're just like, holy shit, to just be able to put that much emotion on the screen like that, and the confidence to be able to do that. And and pull it off is
and the vulnerability.
Vulnerability is like super impressive.
Such a tough guy.
On top of all the other like greatness, how he's just like raising up in the air while he's doing that to just like isolate him and everything. Like, so it looks beautiful on top of like what he's saying is beautiful and how he's saying it is beautiful. Yeah, really good. I do think JCVD is a good one to really just understand him a little bit.
And especially the self-awareness and the kind of being able to poke fun at himself. It definitely, I would not say Cyborg. I don't know how we got to Cyborg in our show, actually. I think what it was that it ended up coming up a lot in other conversations. And my brother, unbeknownst to me, was like really not just like processing the audio, but he was really becoming a fan of our conversations. And we started to joke that like we kept meaning to just touch on Cyborg or something like with other things. It was starting to become the like Jimmy Kimmel, where he's like, we don't have time for Matt Damon tonight.
Matt Damon, sorry to our last guest, Matt Damon. We weren't able to see him today, so it was going to be our running joke that we were always going to just miss talking about Cyborg.
And we had never had a guest, I don't think. And then my brother was like, he's like, oh, we're going to talk about Cyborg. It's like, I'm going to come on and we're going to talk about that movie.
And he was like, really, because the deal was that if I would watch Cyborg, I would get to pick a movie that neither of them would typically have sought out to watch.
Sweet.
And so, and he was like super like committed to that. So my pick was Swiss Army Man. With
Daniel Radcliffe.
And
just farting corpse.
The fart, because like, how do you sell that movie? Just like, how do you sell Cyborg, right? And so, and he really stuck to that and watched. And then we had a whole Swiss Army Man
did,
episode.
and that I might be our longest episode.
Yeah,
in a show that has very long episodes. Like that one might be 4.5 hours edited.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah,
we got into that movie.
Jeff, how about you? Yeah. What JCVD movie would you, if to somebody who's no exposure other than like maybe in the periphery, what movie would you suggest?
Let's see. I wouldn't go with one of his really out there ones. I think I would probably go with Double Impact. That was one of my favorites as a child.
Awesome.
Has double the JCVD. It's not even like his only movie where he plays two people in it either.
Not even close.
It's like 3 of them, right? 3 or 4 he plays twins.
There's that, Replicant, and
Maximum Risk.
Maximum Risk. Yes.
There might even be something else somehow, but
I'm trying to. I know that's pretty much a trope in itself. Is him playing more than
Van
one person.
Johnson? He plays.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Oh man, there's so much. The guy's an onion. I will admit, like I'll give you guys, he's an onion. Like he's
both
an
very
enigma.
Simple and like I don't know. I don't know what to say.
I will say, I'm trying to remember what movie it was, but there was one movie that we had watched that I went, holy shit, this guy can actually act. I was never taking anything away from him, but like he was put into a position where it wasn't his typical like typecast film, and it really kind of blew me away.
I want to say, is it possible it was Wake of Death, that revenge movie? I remember the one that has the torture scene with the.
Yes.
Is that the one?
Yes. I think that might have been it. Yeah.
Because I've heard.
That was a torture scene.
I'm afraid to rewatch that. And it's Van Damme.
Fucking drill.
There it is. Yep. I was trying to remember what the catchline was. Yeah. Oh, that just reminded me.
Yeah.
We got to wrap up soon, or I know you got a place to go. But when I first got together with my wife, we were living. We now live together in Minnesota, but we both grew up in Northeast Ohio. And we were first getting together. She still lived in Minnesota, and I still lived in Northeast Ohio. So I made this like top 10 movies for her of different genres. But I have a Jean-Claude Van Damme genre in my top 10. This would have been in 2006.
That is awesome.
I thought I'd share that, just run down real quick, not to talk about the movies, just to, because I can't quite remember what they are myself.
That is sweet.
So I'll tell you what they are.
And I have to say, I love the reactions of the bride in a lot of the episodes. Just just the funny stuff that comes with it. And it's just like I picture all of this in my head, what goes on and whatnot, but it's just like it's this constant hilarity of just her being like, it almost makes me go, what do you guys have in common? What does she see in you?
All morning,
you've been observing, right?
all morning, she was talking to her dad and stepmom this morning while she was going around and just like straightening up and doing chores. And she just kept referring to us as these two idiots. Like, these two idiots are like, got my house all jacked up. And they're like, these idiots are podcasting in my house. And just like,
They're talking about Jean-Claude Van Damme again?
yeah, like just salty. And like, it's this, it's totally that. When you get her really talking about it and being honest, it's that total like, I have to tear it down because I love it so much. It's almost like a control for her. So that way, like if I'm making fun of it, then I can't get all wrapped up in how much love I have for this person. Their relationship is super beautiful. Honestly,
we have a lot of fun. It's like I love that side of her enough that I have a clandestine Twitter page to document it, and I have for like 5-6 years. But yeah, she's a firecracker, and she's like
with everyone.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, if she knows you enough, if she likes you, that's how she'll talk to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I found it, the list I made for her, and I just remembered this is one of my many neurotic things. I really have trouble ranking things. Like I think I remember you guys did your top 5 JCVD movies at one point.
That was difficult.
I can't. I'd be like, every time it'd be like that scene in High Fidelity where he's calling up the journalist to like revise it so many times that she's like, don't call him anymore. So I just did it chronologically. So these are the ones I singled out, and I made this in 2006, so it only goes up to that time. So we got Bloodsport, we got Cyborg, we got Kickboxer, we got Lionheart, we got Double Impact, Universal Soldier, Hard Target, and then it jumps to Replicant, In Hell, and Wake of Death. Those were my favorites at the time. But I realize now I've only ever seen Wake of Death once.
Oh, must have made an impact.
Yeah, it did.
Maybe a double impact.
Yeah. Ah, there it is.
Nice.
Well, sirs, thank you so very much for allowing us to kind of, have this spot on your podcast. Thank you so much for, joining us on what will be ours.
Absolutely.
Just sharing in all the love for the muscles from Brussels. And please keep making that show in whatever iteration it takes.
I'm looking forward to the Nick Cage one, honestly.
Yes. Where can people, where's the best place to follow you online to keep abreast of all your podcasting ventures?
Oh man, so the main thing nowadays, it got to a point where it just got too crazy with too many different shows to have all these different Twitter handles and whatnot. So we just say facebook.com/Podbros. We're on Twitter at Podbros Network. We have a Damcast one at Damcast on Twitter as well. Instagram at Podbros. That's kind of where we're all at. Email thebros@podbros.com, or we have jpvdamcast@gmail.com. Yeah, we're open to talking with everyone about anything, and thank you guys so much for just even reaching out, doing this to discover, just some more great podcasting as well.
Absolutely,
that's the thing that's awesome. I know that there's something like 700,000 podcasts out there, with only about 250,000 of them that are still live and still doing stuff, but it's awesome to actually get to meet more people outside of something, and as crazy as it is because of Van Damme love. So thank you guys so much as well.
Thanks so much for coming on, and I hope that this is just the start of like a good relationship between
you guys won't be able to get rid of me.
Drink and the Podbros. So
for sure. And what about you guys? For those who, when this gets uploaded on ours, where can they find you at?
For the folks in Sweden.
First off, pick a fucking side and get in there. None of this neutral bullshit, all right? And nobody's fucking neutral in this world. No, sorry. So you can follow us at Twitter at LWSD Pod. Yep. You can go to LWSDpod.com.
Though
we're just getting ready to.
That'll still work.
That will still work, yeah. Longwalkshortdrink.com is coming quickly. Yeah. You can go to youtube.com/longwalkshortdrink.
Yes,
we finally hit our 100 subscribers, and we have our
Holy shit,
unique
I was just about to
URL.
say.
So We can
Awesome.
finally stop hounding you guys to
Nice.
subscribe. No, fucking subscribe because we want that play button now. Yeah, that's the next one. And then
10,000 subscribers.
and then we always plug our sponsors. So go to audibletrial.com/LWSD to download start your Audible trial on your free audiobook. On us, I'd recommend any JCVD books.
There's no JCVD books that I'm
That's
aware
some
of.
bullshit.
I know his
Write a
sister
book.
wrote one, but it's not available in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, a book of your choice. But yeah, so all those places. We're kind of not Facebook. We're not on Facebook.
I can't really be responsible on Facebook.
We don't
so I
blame
have
you.
to
Yeah.
disengage.
But Twitter, our Gmail, lwsdpod@gmail.com. Feel free to email us at that. And youtube.com/longwalks.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And one of my favorite things about your show too is how you bring it around at the end and sort of reference something. So obviously,
Yes.
I don't want
Yeah.
to put you on the spot too much, and we can cut out any dead air if you have to think about it. But I would be so honored to have one of those wrap ups if you can think of one.
Yeah, what are we gonna back reference to?
Yeah.
Oh,
All right,
man.
John, it's your time. Shine.
No, that's it.
I leave this one to you.
Usually I like clip these off big time, but
Like I said-
it's perfect. It's perfect for this. Thunder. Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
You guys rock. Keep doing the Lord's work and
Yeah.
spreading
Thanks, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being great sports.
Oh, thanks so much for having us.
I love observing this love. It's amazing. So really looking forward and hoping that we can spiral back again at some point in
would
the
love it,
future and reconnect. That's
Oh,
but in the
for
meantime,
sure.
please keep up the awesome work. You guys are doing great and love it. Thanks for being a
Thank
part of
you
this
guys.
community.
Thank you guys too.
Oh,
you
thank
too
you.
as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great afternoon, and please thank your significant others for letting you come, give up this Sunday afternoon to come hang out with us and talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme and podcasting.
Oh, for sure. Awesome.